It is 0 hour 30, Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. The Iraqi parliament speaker has postponed a legislative meeting set for Monday. The announcement came after negotiators failed to reach agreement about who will lead the next government. Sunni and Kurdish leaders want the Shiites to replace Ibrahim al-Jafari as their nominee for prime minister. His critics say he has done little to stop religious violence in Iraq. In other news, police in Baghdad say a bomb explosion at a Shiite religious center has killed at least 4 people and wounded 6 others. Also, Baghdad police say at least 12 people were kidnapped Sunday from a business in the city. Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir says his country has no interest in problems in nearby Chad. His comments were published by the official Sunna news agency. Mr. al-Bashir blamed Chad for continuing problems on the country's shared border. He said Chad failed to send representatives to a meeting of a security committee concerned with the situation at the border. In Chad, the government says it has withdrawn from talks about the Darfur area in Sudan. Chadian President Idriss Deby cut diplomatic ties with Sudan on Friday after what he called a Sudanese-supported rebel attack on the capital city in N'Djamena. He also has threatened to expel 200,000 refugees in Chad. A spokeswoman for the United Nations Refugee Agency says the Sudanese would have no place to go if they are forced to leave Chad. In Nepal, people are holding an 11th day of strikes and demonstrations against King Gyanendra. Police in the capital, Kathmandu, fought protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets. Shortages of food and fuel have been reported. Police have seized at least 4 people in an area of the capital popular with travelers. An alliance of 7 political parties organize the protests. They are urging people to stop paying taxes, to pressure the king to return democracy to the country. King Gyanendra dismissed the government and seized total power in February of last year. He says the move was necessary to control a rebellion. At least 4 people have been killed and hundreds wounded in recent protests against him. In Afghanistan, the United States military says 7 civilians were killed in a gun battle between coalition forces and resistance fighters. 3 others were wounded. Military officials say the fighting started in an area of eastern Kunar province where coalition and Afghan troops began an operation against militants. The civilian deaths are being investigated. In other violence, Taliban militants attacked at least 2 police stations in southern Afghanistan. Afghan officials say 14 Taliban were killed, but no policemen were victims. A spokesman for the Taliban said at least 7 policemen and 2 Taliban were killed. Turkish officials say 30 people have been wounded in an explosion near the city of Istanbul. Police have not named the cause. Istanbul's police chief has inspected parts of the Bakirköy area where the explosion took place. No one has claimed responsibility. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. Iran says it is giving $50 million to the Hamas-led Palestinian government to ease a financial crisis caused by international aid cuts. Iranian Foreign Minister Manouchehr Mottaki made the announcement during a conference in Tehran. He called on Islamic countries to help the Palestinians. The new Hamas-led Palestinian government has opened emergency talks with other Palestinian groups. Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh called the meeting in an effort to form a unity coalition and prevent a financial crisis. Reports say Hamas is again urging Islamic Jihad and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades to join the government. Pope Benedict has led his first Easter Sunday service in St. Peter's Square in Rome. Tens of thousands of people gathered for the ceremony at the Vatican. The Pope gave the traditional Easter speech. He called on world leaders to use diplomacy to solve international conflicts. Thousands of Christians from around the world also gathered to celebrate Easter in Jerusalem. The top Roman Catholic clergyman in the city led a religious service at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The church was built next to the ancient stone tomb where Christians believe Jesus rose from the dead. Easter Sunday is the holiest day of the year for Christians. Chinese President Hu Jintao is calling for new talks with Taiwan. Mr. Hu told the Taiwanese former opposition leader Lian Chan that the two sides should restart talks as soon as possible to keep peace in the area. Mr. Lian is visiting Beijing. Mr. Hu says the talks will take place if Taiwan's government accepts the One China policy reached with an earlier administration. Taiwanese President Chen Shui-bian has refused to accept the One China policy as a condition for talks. China and Taiwan separated after a civil war in 1949. China considers the island a rebel province and has threatened military action if Taiwan seeks independence. The former chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff has criticized former generals who publicly called for the resignation of Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. General Richard Myers said it is unacceptable for the former officials to criticize Mr. Rumsfeld. He said it is not the job of the military to judge the work of its civilian leaders. He also said critical comments should not be expressed by military officers, including those who are retired. Several retired generals have recently made public comments about Mr. Rumsfeld. They called him a poor leader, and they accused him of making mistakes in the war in Iraq. President Bush has expressed strong support for Mr. Rumsfeld. Here again is the major news. The Iraqi parliament speaker has postponed a legislative meeting set for Monday. Sudanese President Bashir says his country has no interest in problems in nearby Chad. And in Afghanistan, United States military says 7 civilians were killed in a gun battle between coalition forces and resistance fighters. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington.